we're going to start from where we left off last class. So we were looking at equity market and equity market instruments. We started off by looking at what was equity. Okay. So we started off by looking at what was equity, and then we moved on into what about the differences between equity and debt. And then we moved on to the equity instruments, starting from the most conventional to the most contemporary one. So we started off with ordinary shares, moved to preference, then looked at the convertibility option that came in the midway. And then finally, we have depository receipts. After that, our focus was on the stock market. So we first understood that how stock market is different from stock exchange. What is more broader? The stock market. Why? Stock exchange was just the platform, or it provided you the infrastructure for the participant to meet. But stock market was an entire marketplace. It expands more than the buyer and seller. You have intermediaries and everyone supporting you in that one transaction. Understand? So stock exchange was a component of the stock market. Then we saw why do we need stock exchanges in a country, and then we moved on into the listing of stocks or listing of company shares. So first we saw why do these companies get listed? What are the advantages that attract these companies that they move from a private company to a public limited company? Okay, I'm trying to open my bottle. Okay. So what's the most important benefit that you get from being listed in the stock exchange to a company? Obviously, it allows you to raise more capital than a private company. Why? Private company, your potential investors are limited to your family members. The name itself tells you it's a private company. It's privately held. But when you move to a public company, especially if it's a quoted public company, you need to understand the main advantage is that it provides you the ability to raise money from the general public, which means you can raise long-term capital. Capital is always long-term, remember, not like debt. Debt you could classify as long-term and short-term. But when it comes to capital, equity, it is always long-term. So you need to understand the company has that advantage to raise a bulk amount, a huge amount, okay, from the general public, and that is a long-term financing for the company, which they do not have to pay back. The capital doesn't need to be paid back to the general public. They could keep trading the stock until the company goes to a winding down position. Okay, that is the biggest advantage that a company receives by moving to a public company or being listed in the stock exchange. But remember, just like how it comes with the advantages, there are disadvantages to companies. First one is the cost involved in it. If you're going to list your stock in the stock exchange, it involves a very high cost. Why? The listing process is very costly. You need a lot of intermediaries supporting you to become a listed company, to build up that goodwill, build up that awareness in the stock market, so that the other investors know, look here, there's another company coming into listing. There's another new company coming into the stock exchange. What is their business? Sometimes investors would want to visit the company. So there's a lot of costs involved in terms of attracting and creating awareness about the company. There are also costs relating to the regulation. You need to file a lot of documents. A lot of disclosures are also required. So in terms of the disclosures, the disadvantage comes in 3 ways. One is the cost involved in the disclosures. When you make such disclosures, there's a lot of costs involved. You need to hire, you need to have a secretary who is updated, so that whenever there is a change which needs to be notified to the stock exchange, they need to do their part properly. If not, it comes as a discrepancy. Okay. And the amount of documentation is the second aspect. The amount of documentation is very much. You need to file your financial statements on time. It's not only the annual report, you need to disclose your interims as well. Okay, now especially if you are a banker, if you have a private company coming to get the loan, and they will provide you the audited financials. Okay, so why do you ask for the auditor? It gives you some kind of a certainty. This is audited by someone. The figures has to be somewhat correct, somewhat genuine. But when it comes to public quoted companies, we not only look at audited financials, we look at the unaudited interims as well. Why? Because the unaudited interims are shared to the public. Okay, so if there shouldn't be a discrepancy. That's the first point, because the company is showing, look here, for the 3 months, this is our performance. So they cannot fake such performance. In case there is a deviation, they need to report that deviation to stock exchange as well. They need to say, look here, last interim, I mentioned my revenue as this amount. Sorry, there was an error. It has to be this much. Such disclosures have also to be made. Those are reputationally impacting the company. Therefore, even when they put out the interim, the company is very, very careful. Okay, so when you're talking about a public limited company coming to get financing from a bank, not only they are audited, we will look at their interim as well. We will give a weightage to the interim financials as well. So the company's part, they have to make sure at the end of each quarter, their interim has to be prepared. Not only prepared, it has to be at least checked internally. Now, if I'm correct, I think Dialog makes sure that every 3 quarters, their interims are audited as well when they disclose. That's like an added benefit to the investors. Okay. Not only that, the disclosures, any takeovers that you're planning to do, if the company invests in another listed company, they need to make disclosures. If that particular company's directors buy that company's shares, they need to make disclosures. So the amount of documentation involved is also very, very high. Third aspect that comes from such documentation is the transparency issues. You're disclosing so much that your competitor, some kind of another company which is looking to take you over or buy you over, gets a lot of information about you. They know where is this company heading. Now, if you take a private company, until the annual audited financials comes out, you do not know what happened in that year. Okay. Now, if something like COVID happened, everybody knows that all businesses are affected. If not, on a regular financial year, until that financial year's annual financials come out, for a private limited company, an outsider don't know what's happening inside. Correct? But if it's a public limited company, okay, public quoted company, an investor or anyone outside, anyone who doesn't even own that company share, has access to their interim financials. When I say interim, every 3 months, they need to report their quarterly financial statements. Okay, so I know what is happening with this company. Okay, first quarter, company performed very well. Second quarter, company had a loss. Third quarter, the loss worsened. Fourth quarter, loss worsened. So do I have to wait until the annual report comes? I might have a look at it. But on a broader view, I know 3 quarters are bad, 1 quarter is good. net result is going to be definitely a loss for this company. Okay, so those kind of indication for especially to a predator company who's waiting to buy this company over is like a gold mine. It's an opportunity for them. So with the increased transparency, those kind of issues will also come over. Not only predator, think about the competition. Now, if you know, if there are two companies, let's say you have two stationery companies, okay, two companies that produce stationery, pen and pencil. One is listed in the stock exchange, one is not. Okay, so the company which is listed in the stock exchange, when they make losses, let's say, or a special order, they lost that special order and they made a loss. Okay, the other company which is privately held didn't disclose any information until then, but they are aware that their competitor is now getting weaker, is reporting losses. So the private company has the ability to increase their market share by maybe giving steeper discount because they know their competitor is weak at the moment. Okay, so those are the ways that the information could be used in a disadvantageous manner to the reporting company. Then we saw the methods of getting listed in the stock exchange. We have introduction, where it's a mere listing of the stocks. It's not a method of issue. This is the important line that you need to highlight. Why? Because at introduction, you do not issue any additional shares. Okay. Then you have private placement. What is private placement? It is a method of listing. It is a method of issue, but it's not a method of public issue. See the name, it says private. You're going to privately approach certain high net worth individuals or certain fund companies and sell a larger chunk of your portion at once. What are the advantages, or why would a company prefer a private placement over a public issue? First reason is they are able to sell huge chunks of their prospective issue. Let's say a company is planning to issue 1 million shares. Okay, 1 million number of shares. Okay, if they go for a private placement by approaching merely, let's say, 4 high net worth individuals or 4 fund companies, they might be able to sell the entire 1 million shares. Why? Each in fund or each company or each high net worth individual might subscribe for at least 3 to 2 million of the shares. Okay, so by that, the company is now safe. They know 4 companies are available and already the 4 companies are ready to buy my offering. Okay, if you go for a public issue, that entire 1 million number of shares could be bought by literally 1 million people. If one person buys only 1 share, you will have 1 million shareholders coming in. Okay, that takes a lot of marketing effort from you. It takes a lot of risk from your aspect. What if they don't subscribe? What if some portion is not bought by anyone? That risk is mitigated when it comes to private placement. For sure, you know, okay, this person is going to buy because you agree with them prior. If that person is not willing, then you approach somebody else. You at least save your good image by doing a private placement. Okay, so you're able to sell off chunks of your prospective issue. You're able to ascertain that your shares will be subscribed. Okay, and the cost involved is relatively lower. Okay, those are the advantages as to why they move to a private placement. Usually what companies do is, when it's their initial offer or initial issue, they go for both private and public issue together. They will go for an initial public offering, yes, but if they feel that some part of their issue might not be bought, they'll start approaching certain shareholders, certain high net worth shareholders on a private basis and confirm their quantums. Okay. So after that, we had two methods in which you could publicly offer your shares. One is offer for sale and the other one was offer for subscription. What is the difference between these two? No, let's see the similarity between these two. Both of these are methods of publicly issuing your stocks. It is available to the general public to purchase your shares. Other similarities, in both instances, you have to issue a prospectus. What is a prospectus? It is a document that you issue to the stock exchange detailing about the company, detailing about your public issue, so that the general public or the prospective shareholders can get an idea about the company and the issue as well. Remember, prospectus does not only give you information about the company, it gives you information about the company in terms of the past, present, and the future. There are forecast information as well. Okay. And apart from company information, you also get issue related information. How many shares are they issuing? At what price? How did they decide this price? Why are they going for this issue? How will they use the money? All these information are available in the prospectus. So those two are the similarity between these two methods of going for a public issue. What is the difference? Difference is, in an offer for sale, you are not issuing new shares. But in an offer for subscription, you are issuing brand new shares. Offer for sale, one existing shareholder is selling down their stocks. Offer for subscription, the company is issuing brand new shares in addition to the already issued shares. I hope I'm clear. Okay. So the second difference comes related to this. If an existing shareholder is selling his shares to the general public, and if the general public buys such shares, they will have to pay the money, right? The general public. So when they pay the money, who will receive these proceeds? That would be the selling shareholder. The company gets no money out of offer for sale. The selling down shareholder will receive all the sales proceeds. But when it's offer for subscription, it is the company which is issuing new shares. So the money collected will be directly routed to the company for their expansion purpose. You might wonder why companies still offer for sale. We saw a practical example. We saw on the prospectus of this company called BPPL. It's a brush company. If you have the time, have a look at it. In their prospectus, we saw the reason. But what was their objective behind going for offer for sale? They said the money will go to the selling shareholder, correct? But our objective from this issue is to get the company listed, to create awareness of the company, and to ensure that the company has the ability to create more liquidity for their stocks. Their existing stocks are now listed in the stock exchange. So the liquidity is high. There are so many buyers and sellers, so many buyers who are willing to buy their share in case of a sell down. There are so many buyers who are willing to buy their share in case of a new issue. Okay. Considering those benefits, certain companies still go for offer for sale. Then we saw the advantages of IPO, which is more or less closer to the advantages of being listing, and even the IPO related costs involved. And from today, we are going to start off with the types of stock issuances or the stock related transactions. Now, when we come to this, what I want you to understand is there are 5 types that we are going to discuss: bonus issue, rights issue, stock split, stock repurchase, and a mandatory offer. Okay. Now, when you talk about bonus issue, what is important that you need to understand is, look at the term. It says a bonus issue. It's something that you're going to get in addition. Okay. So if it's a bonus issue, you're getting something additional, remember? So will it be issued to new investors? No. The existing shareholders of the company will be entitled for this issue. They are going to get something as a bonus. Okay. So if it's a bonus, it has to come with a better advantage to the investors. Okay. So in a bonus issue, what happens is, you are going, or the company is going to issue free shares. Simple as that. Let's say all of us here are shareholders of, let's say I have a company, I have the controlling stake of that company, and all of you all are shareholders in that. Okay. And this company is now thinking of doing a bonus issue, which means they will say, according to your shareholding, the company is now willing to give you free shares. The company say, okay, you take the shares, you don't have to pay me back. So there is no any cash inflow to the company. If you take the cash flow statement of that company, there won't be an inflow from, say, share issues. Why? It is bonus, it's free. The company would just issue the shares to their existing shareholders according to the percentage of their ownership. So if let's say the controlling stake of myself is 60% and each of y'all hold the balance 40, when the company issue their bonus shares, they will decide the quantum of the bonus share. Let's say they will go for 1 million bonus shares. Okay, number, I'm talking about the number of shares to be issued as a bonus issue is 1 million. Okay, so they will say, according to the percentage of ownership, 60% of that 1 million bonus issue will be mine. So which means 600,000 shares will come to me as free shares. I don't have to pay for it. I will get it as my addition. And you all will get the balance 40 as free. You don't have to pay anything, but you get some additional shares. Okay. You will be wondering, why is this company doing this? There are two reasons behind why such companies do a bonus issue. The very first reason is, if the company has reserves which is now growing and at a very higher level, and they want to capitalize these reserves. Okay. Now, if you take a financial statements of the company, on the equity section, what do you get? You get stated capital. You will get retained earnings. Sometimes you will have revaluation reserves. Okay. Now, this retained earnings is what? You are retaining part of your profit without declaring as bonus, or without declaring as dividends. You are accumulating so that one day, if there is any requirement for expansion, you might, instead of going for another loan or going for another share issue, you have your retained profit to use it for. Okay. So if that retained earnings is now growing so much, and the company could decide, instead of going for a dividend, if they go for a dividend, what happens? They have to pay out as cash. Okay. Dividend meaning the company needs to pay us cash, pay the shareholders in cash, which will have a cash outflow for the company. The company would think, we have a lot of retained earnings. Why not capitalize it? Let's go for a bonus share issue. So the company's point of view, they don't have to have a cash outflow. So the burden on the company's cash position is less or nothing, nil. Okay. On the other side, their retained earnings is now capitalized, which means they have a stronger stated capital now. And on the other end, the shareholders are also very happy. Why? They get a bonus of free shares. So it's a certain situation, it's a win-win situation for both the company and the shareholder. Okay. So thinking about that, companies would prefer to go for a bonus issue. Remember that. From a bonus issue, what happens? It will definitely increase the stated capital of the company. It will be a reduction in their retain or their reserves and an increase to their stated capital. Why? The number of shares is now increasing. Okay. But will the par value of the share be different? No. Usually par value of a share is considered as 10 rupees. It will remain as it is, but the number of shares in issue is now increasing. Okay. Remember, bonus share issue, bonus share issue, it's a free additional shares given to existing shareholders. There is no cash inflow to the company from this. No cash outflow for the company by way of dividends for the company. No cash inflow in terms of a share issue to the company. Both of these are important for you to remember. Other way, stated capital of the company will increase, but the par value of the share will remain as it is. Okay. Next, we have a rights issue. Now, rights issue is not so lucrative as a bonus issue. Remember, bonus issue was free for us, the shareholders, it was free. Rights issue is where you will have a new share issue. That is correct. But it is not given for you for free. It is given for you at a discounted price from the current trading price. Okay. Remember that rights issue meaning you are getting additional shares, correct? But it is issued at a price which is lesser than the price than it is being traded in the stock exchange. So from this, what happens? The company gets additional money, or they will have a inflow in terms of share issue. But it's not so much, but it's somewhat bigger. Okay. It's not the entire current trading price that they get at, but they will get some kind of a cash inflow. For the shareholder, what's the benefit? They will get additional shares at a much lesser price than what is being traded in the stock market. Okay. So that is the biggest advantage or biggest reason why they go for a rights issue. They need some money, but the company would require some money for their expansion, but they are not going for a new share issue. They're not going for a new public issue. Okay, you need to understand how these two are different. Rights issue is your target audience is your existing shareholders. You are not going for a new shareholder to be on board. Same example as before, all of us are shareholders of one company where I have the controlling stake, 60% and 40. If this company is going for a rights issue of 1 million shares, I will have the right to buy 60% of that rights issue at, let's say, the current trading price is 100 rupees. The company will issue the rights at 50 rupees. So I have the rights to buy 600,000 shares at 50 rupees each. All of you all will have a right to buy 40% of that share issue at 50 rupees each. But it's for the existing shareholder. If it's a brand new share issue, you are going to issue additional shares at a market reflecting price. Okay, it won't be a discounted price, and you are going to attract or your target audience is going to be the new shareholders. Okay, so that is different from the rights issue. Remember that. Then we have stock split. If you were aware about what's happening in the stock market in the recent times, you would know that stock split has become very, very famous and highly used technique in our stock exchange. What is this share split? What happens in a share split is you are going to divide your existing number of shares into multiple shares. For example, let's say I have only one share of a company. Okay, and the company announces we are going for a share split where one share is split into two. So earlier I had only one share. After the share split, I would end up with two shares. The number of shares in issue is going to increase. If you can just mark it or highlight over here, what it does is it's going to increase the number of shares in issue. But by just increasing the number of shares in issue, what will happen? The stated capital will increase by a lot of number of shares. But in a share split, what is important is the stated capital cannot change. The stated capital or the market capitalization of that company will have to remain as it is. If you take the market capitalization or the stated capital, it cannot increase before the share split to after the share split. It has to remain the same. But we know the number of shares are going to increase. Then you need to understand what is the other part which is going to have a reduction, the share price. In a share split, what happens is when my existing number of share is split into multiple shares, the price per share is going to get split as well. It is going to get split or reduced after the share split. You might get confused. Let's come with an example. Assume I have one share which is 1,000 rupees. So what is my entire investment in this? 1,000 rupees. Correct? Now the company is going for an announcement where they're saying one share is going to be split into two. So my one share will be split into two shares. Okay. But my total investment has to remain at 1,000 itself. It's not going to increase. Then what happens? Each share, earlier one share was 1,000. Now one share is going to be 500. So when the number of shares increase, the price or the par value of the share is now going to have a reduction. What is the objective behind such a share split? Why companies do this is when they feel their company's share price has increased to a very, very high level. Okay, when they feel their company share price in the stock exchange or in the stock market is now at a very high level, they would decide to split that share. Now, for example, take this company, Ceylon Tobacco. You can see what is the share price. One share of that company is now 1,005 rupees, close to 1,005. Okay. So one share is at 1,005. So if I'm going to invest in this company and I have only 1,000 rupees, I still can't afford. I need to bring additional 5 rupees in. Okay. So it takes a huge investment to buy at least few shares of this company. Okay. Take this company. One share of this company is 3.5 rupees. If I have only 1000 rupees, I can buy so much of this company's shares, a larger quantity of shares than what could have bought at Ceylon Tobacco. I couldn't even afford one share with 1000 rupees, but here I can buy a larger quantity of shares. So if you take retail investors, who are retail investors? Smaller investors who are there to, their idea is to get a capital gain out of it. Out of trading, they want to have capital gain, increase their investment and get out. Okay, and they come with very small investment. They have 100,000 only 200,000, very small amounts. So such investors might not prefer when the share of the company is so high. Okay, but if it's less, they can buy a high quantum. So what share will have a high demand from retail investors? Shares with a lower price. So when the share with a lower price gets a higher demand, what happens? It has a higher liquidity in the market. There are so many buyers and sellers who are willing to trade on that share. But if you come here, it's 1000. The demand is going to be lesser. Understand? Let's take even this company. It's easier for me to compare our Access Engineering versus tobacco. Okay, so here you can say in this, when it's at a higher price, the demand is quite less. Okay, but when the price is lower, demand is very high, it becomes a highly traded share. And here you can see for Friday, entire day of, sorry, I thought it's a Saturday today. If it's on for last Wednesday, yesterday, entire day, only 24 shares. Okay, 24 trades have happened. Okay, number of trades is only 24. How much is the share volume that you traded? Only 204 shares have been bought and sold. Okay, let's go to this. This share, which has a very much lesser value than the tobacco company what we saw, has a higher trade count and a higher share volume. Large number of shares are now bought and sold. That is what is the benefit that you get from liquidity when you have a lower price. So certain companies would prefer, if they reduce their stock price, the number of trading will increase. A lot of demand is available to that company. They would go for a share split and reduce their share price in the market by splitting the number of shares. Okay, by splitting the number of shares, does the company get any cash inflow? No. No cash impact to the company, no change in their stated capital, no change in their market capitalization. These values will remain as it is, but number of shares will increase, share price will fall. Okay, the two variables will change, but the end result will remain constant as it is. Now, around January 21st, if you were reading the news, especially the finance news, you would have come across this headline. Share split is also called as share subdivision. So on January 21st, Haley's Group announced the largest subdivision. Why I'm stressing you on this is Not only Haley's, if I remember, Industrial Asphalt, CIC Group, Haley's was another one of the biggest split, and I think even Tile, Lanka Tile related group of Dhammika also announced a share split. So share split was like the most talked method across the stock exchange from last year November to this year February. Okay, and this was one of the biggest share division. Why? Haley's and 13 of their subsidiaries at once declared a share split. I don't have the grid with me at the moment. All their share prices were split. Several articles. So, moment they announced this share split, you can see how the stock market reacted. The stock market started buying that company shares on a very before when they announced such a stock split. There was so much of energy coming from the stock market. A lot of investors were keen to purchase these company shares. Why? They know if they buy the share before the split, after the split, when you split the company, when you split the number of shares, lot more demand will come in and it will drive the company shares even higher. Okay, why? The demand is going to be so high. Okay, so therefore the prior to the split, the demand from the investors was very much higher. There used to be a chart with the pre and the post split. I'm unable to get it. Because certain companies, so this was the, here you can see the CSE announcement. These were the proportions. So Haley's 1 share was split into 10 shares. Deep Product 1 share was split into 10. Alumex 1 is into 2. So this shows the current position and this shows the new number of shares. So when the new number of shares, the quantum is increased to these amounts. So if you split 1 share into 2, the one price of the stock will now get divided by 2. If you take Deep Products, before the stock split, the price of 1 share was close to 700 rupees. After the split, it came to 70 rupees. Okay, so if it's 70 rupees, anyway, let's say I have only 1000. Earlier, I can only buy 1 share of Deep Products. Now, for 70 rupees, I can buy 10 times. Okay, 10 shares of it. That is the benefit that you get from a subdivision. Stock repurchase. Now, stock repurchase is done by the company when they have a lot of reserves or when they have high cash, mainly. When they are in a financially stable position, they would opt to go for a share repurchase. What happens in a share repurchase is the company is now buying back the shares that they issued. Okay, now let's say one company issued shares at 8 rupees. Okay, and we all bought. After the purchase, now it's getting traded from 8 rupees. The share price went into 12, then collapsed to, let's say, 4 rupees, then moved into 16 rupees. So currently the share is getting traded, let's say, at 20 rupees. Initially, it was issued at 8 rupees. Okay, now current market price is 20 rupees. So the company, if the company has developed their cash position so well, they would decide, let's consolidate the ownership. There are so many shareholders. Why not reduce the number of shareholders? Let's consolidate the company with only few shareholders. So why not? Let's go for a share repurchase. We have a lot of cash reserves with us. Let's buy back the shares we issued. So when the company goes for a share repurchase, Will they repurchase at the price they issued itself? They issued at 8 rupees, let's say. Will they repurchase at 8 rupees itself? Even if they try to do that, will the investors sell? Obviously no. You can't do that. If they say 8 rupees, nobody is going to come for that repurchase. What the company does is they will have to repurchase at the market value. So if it is getting traded at 20 rupees, they will have to buy back that share at 20 rupees. Okay. So the investor, what happens? If I bought from 8 and is now holding at 20, I have the option to sell it back to the company at 20 rupees and get my gain. The company will have to pay 20 rupees each for the stock, pay out as cash and buy back that company share and cancel such shares. So the shares in outstanding will reduce. Okay. Remember that the shares in outstanding will reduce. If you remember at initial phase, we saw stated capital and market capitalization. The shares of number of shares issued or the number of shares listed after a repurchase will be reduced. Okay. So when this reduce and the face value and the par value won't have any change, the stated capital of the company will also reduce. And the company is comfortable with that. Because usually a share repurchase is not done by a very small company. It is done by established company. Let's say, for example, John Keel's PLC. Companies who are comfortable in their cash position and who have adequate number as retained earnings. Okay. When they have a larger net worth or larger equity, so they are willing to come down on the stated capital. Remember that. Here, the company has to buy back at the market value. Practically what happens is the company announces the share repurchase and they announce a date. They say they will buy back the company's share at the price it was trading yesterday. So let's say yesterday the company was trading at 19 rupees. Today it's trading at 20. Before this announcement came in, what happens? Quickly, everyone will now come back to 19 rupees. This trading will now get reducing at 19. Will you buy a share at 20 rupees when you know the company is willing to buy back that share at 19? Obviously no. Okay. So practically what happens is the company will issue a date. They will refer to the price at which they buy by referring to a date. They will say closing price on this particular date is the price in which you are going to buy back. Okay. Now, share repurchase, what the company needs to be careful is when they go for a stated capital reduction, which will eventually cause some kind of a reduction in their equity, it's going to increase the company's dependency on other sources of financing, which is the debt sources. So that's why I'm always repeating, usually it's done by a company which is comfortable with its growth position, which has already expanded and they're comfortable with their balance sheet structure. If you're already a highly levered company who has borrowed so much, will you go for a share repurchase? Why? If you go for a repurchase, your gearing ratio is going to be even higher. Even though you didn't get any new loans, your equity is reducing, which means your gearing ratio is going to be even higher. Your lenders will panic. The banks, if you have given a loan to such a company, you are going to panic. Why? Equity, the owner's contribution is now reducing. Okay, so that's why usually stock repurchases are done by highly established companies. Are there any doubts? Okay. Finally, we have mandatory offer. mandatory offer is a, how do I say it? It occurs at a very different instance. What happens is, now we talked about predatory companies, no? Or a situation where another company buys, another listed entity. Okay, so if they buy another company and they buy more than 30% of that company, what happens? Ultimately, that new company which purchased more than 30% is now going to get a larger controlling power. Why? They have, remember, voting rights I'm talking about. So they have the ability to control that company at a much larger level than other minority shareholders. Okay. Now, if you take for example, recently certain companies which went into such mandatory offer was People's Merchant. I think they back in 2019 they went in for it. Let me check. Here you can see. So this particular entity bought more than 30% of this finance company. So moment such thing happened, as per CSE regulation, the company which bought more than 30% has to offer a mandatory offer to the other shareholders. Now be careful. Understand what I'm saying. It's not the company which offers it. Okay. It is the acquiring company which is going to offer this. Let's go to our board. So let's say you have 3 shareholders. For some reason, this is now not working. A, B, C. Each of them, there are, let's say, altogether 100 shares in issue. A holds 70 shares. B holds 15. C also holds 50. Okay. So ideally, if you take in terms of percentage, 70% of the control is with A, 15% of the control is with B, and 15% with C. Now what happens is, let's assume that a new investor called X, okay, now X is coming on board and X has purchased shares from A. So you have A and X as the new shareholders, where now A has sold down to X, right? Now A only has 20 shares. X has 50 shares. B and C has no change. Now how has the controlling structure changed? X has 50% control over the company. A has only 20%. B 15, C 50. Now what happens in this situation is, A gave the control or gave majority of their stake to X. Now X is the controlling shareholder. according to whose right the company decisions will be made. Let's say there is a company decision that is required to be made. Unless A, B, C agree together, then only you will get another 50 for a no. Whatever decision taken by X will be valid. By X has 50% of the rights. Let's say X and B thought a decision is good and A and C thought the decision is bad. A and C together cannot change that decision. Why? X has the controlling power. Okay. So when such thing happens, the minority shareholder, who is a minority shareholder? Shareholders who have a lesser stake than the controlling shareholder. In this example, it would be B and C. Why not A? Because A already did the transaction with X. Therefore, A is omitted. A already made the decision. B and C is now at an advantage. They didn't want to sell their shares to X, and now X is a shareholder. Now they are scared. What if this company is, all the activities of the company is run according to what X wants? What if X drives this company into a loss? My investment might get declined. Okay, so B and C would be at a difficult position, at a disadvantage. So in a mandatory issue, what the stock exchange wants X to do, not the company, want X to do is, stock exchanges, look here, if you buy more than 30% of a company, at least on a cumulative basis, you have to offer the minority shareholders a mandatory offer. It's a compulsory offer, giving them the chance to sell their shares at the same price you bought. Let's say X bought 50 shares from A at 9 rupees. Then, in a mandatory offer, X is now bound to give an offer to B and C. Look here, I'm willing to buy your shares as well at the same price, 9 rupees. If you wish, you can sell it to me. Okay, that is what a mandatory offer is. Now you can understand why A didn't get that right. Why? A has already sold at 9. Now he is giving the chance to the minority shareholders. And see this example here. They have given the dates only. So here you can see the details of the offer. So here you can see in stages, this particular company called Sterling acquired this finance company's shares. Totally, the ownership came to 67.9% at the end. And they bought at 9 rupees and 50 cents. Because they crossed 30% of the voting right of this finance company, they, under the Takeover and Mergers Code of the Securities and Exchange Commission, this Sterling company is mandated, they are compulsory to offer a mandatory offer. Here you can see, makes a mandatory offer to the remaining shareholders of the finance companies. And what is the offer? They have to offer to buy the remaining the shares of the remaining shareholders at the same price in which they bought. So Sterling bought at 9 rupees and 50 cents. Therefore, they are willing to buy. They are making a mandatory offer to acquire from shareholders of PMF all the remaining issued and the paid up ordinary shares at 9.5 rupees, being the highest price at which Sterling acquired the finance company's shares. Okay, this is what you call mandatory offer. But remember, in here, offer is made from the newly acquiring company, not the listed company, not the finance company. Remember, it's Sterling that has to offer the other shareholders. The newly controlling shareholder has to offer the remaining shareholders. Okay, why do they do this? It gives a chance to the remaining shareholders that if they don't like, or if they feel that the new shareholder might act in a disadvantageous manner, to give the opportunity to the remaining shareholders to get out of the company at a comfortable price. Okay. Then we move to something called bull and bear market. Any doubts? Okay. Bull and bear market. Now, these are two terms which are widely used when it comes to stock exchange or the stock market. If you read the headlines during January, I think I don't have a daily FT copy with me at the moment. I'll show it to you. Always they use these two terms, bearish, bullish markets. Okay. Okay, excellent. I think I got it. Here you can see. Bullish start in 2021 at Colombo stock market. So what do you mean by the term bullish? What if they say bearish start? What does that mean? That's how you term bullish and bearish, is how you term certain market ways. When a market acts in a certain manner, you call it bearish or bullish. Now we are going to see at what situation they call it that. I'm trying to see when they have used bearish. As I recall, 29 Jan, there was a huge fall in the stock market. There's a lot of selling. Okay, not here yet. Usually on the front page, you get all these details, especially on daily FT, because at that times here you can see. So in less than a month, the stock exchange had a U-turn in the activities. It was a bullish start, and now it was going towards a bearish movement. So what does it mean? What do you mean by a bull market? Now, bull, think about the animal. Bull is always overpowering. It always goes forward. What does it mean? It indicates a market which is positive, which is high growth. In other words, if a market or an economy, for that sake, having good employment levels, good levels of GDP, moving forward, indicating a growth, you call it a bullish economy or a bullish market. If you take the stock exchange, when they term it as bullish, it means the stock market of that stock exchange, the stocks in that stock exchange are recording a increase over time. The prices of that stock is keep on increasing. That is important. The word bullish meaning going forward. You can even, there are sometimes they use the word bullish outlook. Certain investors, they will say, even though the market is currently bearish in nature, I expect a bullish outlook in the next 6 months, which means the investor believe in the next 6 months, the stock market will revive, go forward, show a growth in their market turnover and their indices or the prices. Okay. But what is important is a bull market cannot last forever. A market cannot always keep increasing. If it is kept on, if it continues its increase, there could be an opportunity where the market can be overvalued. Okay, that is important. You need to understand the bullish market is only a trend. It will increase. Similarly, it would go for a downfall as well. What is the opposite? Bear market. Bear in terms of animal, always it doesn't charge forward, right? It always is on a it's willing to surrender. Okay, so bear market, what happens? It shows a downfall, a recession. If you take an economy, a recessionary economy is what you call as a bear economy. Or in terms of a bear market, when the market is experiencing a continuous fall in the stock prices. You will see certain investors commenting that they have a bearish outlook for the next coming 2 weeks. Why? Even now the stock market is having a reversal or having a continuous drop in their prices. Therefore, it's a bearish outlook that certain investors have for the coming 2 weeks or at least coming 1 week. Okay. Now, what is important for you to understand is, in a bull market, it is very easy for an investor to trade. Let me show you why. Here you can see, this is the all share price index, correct? Movement across 1 year. You can see from this point until this point, from 4,000 points to 8,000 points, the market had a bullish impact or a bullish trend where the prices of the stock kept increasing. There were certain instances where it was a drop, but on an overall level, it was a continuous increase. Especially if you take from this bit, if you take from starting from here till here, it was a high growth time. Okay. Now, during this time, it's easy for us to trade. Why? If I buy on this day, May 11, and sell the next day, the price was higher. Let's say if I buy today, August, and then sell it in October, December, the prices will be higher. Why? The indices in August was only around 5,000. In December, it is 6,000. The indices show the price movement. Okay, that also we'll learn. So it's very easy for me to trade. If I buy today, I definitely know in a bull market, the price of that stock is going to increase. But in a bear market, what is a bear market? When it's a downfall, here you can see January we were at 5,900. Now we collapsed in May to 4,300. Bearish market. January we were at 8,000, but now we are at 7,000. Okay, here also you can see a downfall. Okay. So in this scenario, in these times, it is not easy for you to trade. You know, if you buy a stock today at 10 rupees, tomorrow that stock price will decrease to 8. Day after, it might come down to 5. It's a continuous drop that you see. So in a bearish market, it's not easy for an investor to trade. What strategy can they use in a bear market is the short selling technique. It is a technique that the investor can use and get higher returns even when the stock market is having a downfall. And let's see what that is. Why short selling is important? Why are we discussing it now especially? Because in our stock exchange, we saw both bullish and bearish markets, this especially the time during your exam. And what is important is last year, September, the Colombo Stock Exchange and the Securities and Exchange Commission were discussing about introducing short selling in Sri Lanka. We still don't have it. They're contemplating, they're thinking of introducing this concept to the Sri Lankan market. Therefore, we need to understand what this is. After I explain, I'll tell you a global incident that happened very, very recently. Now, short selling, you know, it happens in a bearish market, not in a bullish market, in a bearish market. What's going to happen here is, let's take it as month here. That's good. Okay. Let's take this as just for the example. Let's view this as a company share. Okay. Just imagine that this is a company's share price, which is showing this kind of a movement. Now, in this trend, what is happening? The company's share, which was at 8,000, has now moved down to 7,000 levels. In short selling, what you do is an investor borrows a share from another investor. The starting point is very, very important for you. In this starting point, what happens? If I am the one who's doing the short selling technique, I'm going to use the short selling technique and get a gain for me. I will borrow a share from another investor. Let's say you have a share. I'm asking, can you lend me that share for 1 month? And I will borrow that share for 1 month. I have to give it to you back at the end of the month. Okay. I will borrow that stock. And at the time I'm borrowing, the share price was at 8,000. What I would do is, I would immediately sell that stock. I have borrowed it, and what is the risk I'm taking? I need to return it to you in 1 month. But immediately, I'm selling that stock. So on the day one I borrowed, I will immediately sell. I will sell at 8,000. Okay. When do I have to return it? I have to return in 1 month's time. So that is 15 Feb, 15th March. Okay. So on 15th March, as per the trend, let's say it has a downfall. On the day of the return, I borrowed the stock and immediately sold at 8,000. Okay. Now, when I have to return it, I simply have to buy that stock from the stock market at a much lesser price, closer to 7,000. I can buy that stock from the stock market at 7,000 and return it to you, return to the borrowed shareholder from the shareholder to from whom I borrowed, I will return it. Now, for the returning share, the shareholder who lent it, what is the benefit? He will get a fee. Why? I borrowed it, right? I have to pay him a fee. So the fee might be somewhere closer to, let's say, 200 rupees. For me, I borrowed a share which is not mine, sold it immediately and got 8,000 rupees in my hand. Okay. In 1 month's time, I bought from that 8,000, using 7,000, I bought the stock back and returned it to you and gave you another 200. And now I have 800 rupees. In a market where it was a downfall, if I had this stock, I would have lost 1,000 rupees. Now I have 800 rupees as a profit. If you take as from the investment value of 8,000, I have nearly got 10% of a return. Correct? So that is what you call short selling. What is important is on the day one, you don't buy this stock. You borrow this stock. If you buy this stock, you can't immediately sell that stock. That doesn't work like that. You buy it at 8,000 and immediately sell at 8,000. It's no profit, no loss for you. Okay. Initial point, you need to borrow the stock from someone else and immediately sell it. And when the market is having a continuous downfall, at the day you have to return, or sometimes on the day the market has its worst crash. Let's say between these 2 months, on one particular day, the stock price went so low and all of a sudden rebounded. The person who's practicing short selling could decide, let's buy it at this point. It's the lowest it has gone. At 6,000, they might quickly buy. Or certain investors could wait until the day they have to return. However, when they return, they have to return with a fee. Still, they will get the benefit from that price downfall. I hope you understood. This diagram is for that. Short seller borrows assets like a share for a fee and agrees to return them at an earlier date. Short seller then sells the asset on to someone else. Usually that happens immediately. Why? They know continuously the price is falling in the market. As deadline to return the share nears, short seller buys new assets from the market to return to the original owner. If the asset price has fallen, short seller makes profit from the difference. So they sold at a higher price, repurchased at a lower price. Even with the fee, they will get a profit. Okay. This is what you call short selling, and this is one of the ways you can earn a return in a bearish market. Now, what is important that you need to know is a practical incident that happened globally very recently, I think somewhere around January. There's a company called GameStop. Okay, there's a company called GameStop. What happened is, what is this company? This company sells video games. Okay, and this particular company is listed in the stock exchange in America. Now, certain short sellers, who are the people? Short sellers, investors who practice this short selling technique. Certain short sellers anticipated, they saw that the GameStop share price is having a decline. Let's say something like this. There's a continuous decline. So what they did was, they borrowed shares to practice this short selling technique. Now, these short sellers are not small investors like you and me. They are high net worth individuals. Certain funds even do that. So they had something closer to $100 million invested. They had $100 million. Okay, in terms of dollars. Okay. This is USD. Okay. So what did the short sellers do? They entered into this short selling agreement with the investor who is now lending. An investor has to give it to them, right, to borrow. So let's say you are one of the shares, you all are one of the shareholders. I am the short seller. For 100 million worth share, $100 million worth of price. Let's say the quantity was around 10 million shares. Okay. 10 million shares. 10 million shares. Okay. I, the short seller, borrowed 10 million shares from the already GameStop shareholders as a short seller. Okay. What was my view? I will immediately sell that 10 million shares in the market, but within the time frame, I need to buy it back and return it. What happened was, now I just like me, there are high net worth individuals, high net worth funds. What happened was, on an internet platform, something like Facebook is what you call Reddit. Okay, if you have seen, Reddit is another platform. In that platform, discussion over these shares happened, and they noticed that certain high net worth investors are borrowing these shares and engaging in short selling. What they decided was, these other parties, they said we need to, now they were thinking, now these funds are high net worth funds, something like a Robinhood scenario. They're earning high gain when all the others are suffering from COVID and no jobs. We need to teach them a lesson. And what happened was, these small Reddit followers, they came to the stock market and started buying these GameStop shares. They started to increase the GameStop shares prices. Now to the short seller, what happened? Let's say I borrowed it today with the intention to sell it, return it on this particular day. These Reddit followers came to know about this, and they started to demand for GameStop shares. That share is useless, but their objective was to ruin these high net worth individuals. So they start to demand for these GameStop shares, and the GameStop share price, instead of going to a downfall, started going up now. Okay, it's now not having a downfall, it is having a bullish trend. From 8,000, price went to somewhere closer to 10,000, as an example I'm telling you. Okay, now what's happening to the short seller? He's having a mere heart attack. Why? I need to return back that stock, and the stock is having a share increase. Can I default on my agreement? Can't. I have to return. So on that date, so many investors had to buy back that share at a price higher than what they sold. For example, when you see this diagram, at some price closer to 10,000, and to return to the initial shareholder. So many short sellers were exposed to this risk, and they lost a huge amount of their own money. Now, earlier, if you take this example, short seller borrowed the share, sold it, and have 8,000. What is my intention? It will grow down to 7,000. I can buy it at 7,000 and have the gain. If the share price went to 10,000, I have to use the entire 8,000 that I sold for, and out of my own money, I have to put another 2,000 and buy that stock and return it. So many short sellers lost their investment in this stock because of this. It was a huge issue in US. So many Reddit followers were behind that. it's very funny when you think about it as well. And that also happened because of high disclosures. These short sellers made they have mandatory to make disclosures, right? So they made disclosures as to how much of shares they hold under short sale. So the Reddit followers were able to identify that, and they were able to demand this, and the GameStop shares took a U-turn rather than a downfall, because the company was doing so bad. It was obvious that the share price is going to have a downfall. Okay, and all of a sudden, when it took a U-turn as this, so many short sellers lost their money. Read it in the internet. I'm pretty sure there'll be several articles when you check for GameStop share price. Here you can see it happened during this particular peak time. Always the price was so low, but when this was known, the price took a drastic hit. See, it was the highest price it has ever gone for. Okay, and that happened due to this. Just have a look at it in Wikipedia. I'm pretty sure they should be having it. You can see the short squeeze of GameStop shares. Have a read on it, because it was a global event. Okay. Then we have stock symbol. What is the stock symbol? It is the ticker that is used to denote a company in the stock exchange. Even though certain companies change their names after being listed, the ticker of the company remains unchanged. Now, for example, if you take Haley's Fabric, this is the new name. Earlier, this company was called Haley's MGT. That was the company's name. So at the time of with that name is when the company came into listing. Therefore, their ticker is MGT.N. We know .N meaning voting shares. MGT refers to that particular company. Usually, it's a 4 letters that come before that dot to denote that particular company. Okay, here it is MGT. After they listed the company, they changed the company's name to Haley's Fabric. However, the ticker or the stock symbol of that company remains unchanged. That is it's an alphabetical alpha and numeric. You can see MGT.N with 4 zeros at the back. That is used to denote that particular company's share, not only locally, even internationally. If you go to this forum called Investing. Investing is a global platform that you can have foreign exchange, forex rates, everything. So here I can type DIPT, which is the ticker of this particular company. DIPT Products PLC is the company's name. That ticker goes as DIPD.N. Moment I write the first 4 letters, you can see out of all the stocks, that appears to. Okay, it's used to uniquely identify the stock. Next, we have types of trade orders. Now, when in the stock exchange or in the stock market, when you execute orders, buyers and sellers have to put their orders, right? It takes several types, and we are going to see what they are. Now, how it works is, there is a platform. In the next class, I'll try to show you a screenshot of it. There is a platform or a software using which the shareholders can put their order, or usually they will call their their broker and say, look here, I need to put this order. Why don't you put it to the system? And the broker will put it to the system. Okay. So on one column, you will have the buyer's orders. One column, you will have the seller's orders. Okay. And depending on how it gets matched, the trade will get executed. I will show you a screenshot of it on Saturday. Okay. Now, what is market order? It is one of the most common type of trade orders in the stock exchange. What happens here is your intention is to immediately execute the order. What is your intention? Your intention is to immediately execute the order at the best price. Okay, let's say the stock is getting traded at 60 rupees. Okay, currently it's going at 60 rupees. You will call your broker and say, please buy 1,000 shares of this stock immediately. Okay. So what happens? The broker has to immediately buy it at 1,000. And now let's say when you talk to the broker, price is 60. When the broker enters the stock order to the system, it might have moved to 61. So at the time you put the order at the best price, you're collecting the 1,000. So it can be 61, 62, you buy the entire 1,000. Okay. Your intention is to execute the order immediately. You're not worried about the price. At the ongoing price, you need to buy it. Okay. What is the advantage of this order? The investor can immediately get the shares into his hands. He can immediately purchase the shares. For sure, he knows his order got executed. Okay. Now, in the system, when you enter a market order, they won't let me select the price. Why? I just have to enter 1,000. From the system, it will immediately, at the ongoing price, it will quickly purchase. Okay. But what is the disadvantage? As an investor, I don't know at what price am I buying. Until the trade gets executed, I don't know the price. Only after the trade execution, I will know, my God. When I gave the order, it was 60 rupees. But when he executed the order, I bought at 65. Okay. So the price certainty is not there in a market order. At the current price, immediately you are trying to buy the share. Why do they practice this type of order, you might wonder? Because in a situation where the stock price is increasing drastically. Okay. Now, last few months, you would have seen certain stocks, especially like dipped, Haley's, Haycarb. In a day, the share price increased by 10 rupees. Okay. So when you have such kind of shares, and when you execute a market order immediately, let's say you bought the share at 65, but during the day it went to 70 rupees, you could immediately sell and get a profit. Okay. When you know the share price is having a continuous increase and you want to immediately buy the stock, you practice a market order. Next, we have a limit order. What is a limit order? It is like the opposite of a market order. Limit order, your objective is to buy at the best price. You don't want to immediately buy the stock, but you want to buy the stock at the best price possible. Okay. So in a limit order, you will call your broker and say, look here, I need to buy 1,000 shares of dipped Haley's dip products. Okay. But you have to buy it less than 60 rupees. So what does the broker do? The broker has to wait until the price hits less than 60 to execute the order. What is the advantage from it? To an investor knows at what price it will be bought. You know, as the investor, definitely the purchase price will be less than 60. But you don't know when they will buy the shares. Sometimes entire day today, the share price didn't come to less than 60. So today they didn't buy. Tomorrow you have to see. Day after. So you don't know the day in which you will buy that stock. Okay. Limit orders are of two types. You have a buy limit and you have a sell limit as well. When it comes to a buy limit order, your execution price is going to be lesser than or equal to the limit price. What am I talking about? Execution and a limit price here. What do you mean by limit price? That's the price that I'm telling the broker, look here, this is the limit price. 60 rupees or less. So what is the limit price? 60 rupees. So the execution price, the price in which the broker will buy from the market, has to be either equal to the limit price of 60 or lesser than the limit price of 60. Okay. When it's a sell limit order, what will be my order to the broker? Sell at 100 rupees or higher. Obviously, no, I will only have a minimum limit. I will say 100 rupees or higher, not below 100, not at all. At least it has to be 100. Okay, that is going to be a sell limit order. So in a sell limit order, what is my limit price? 100. 100 or higher, correct? So the limit price is 100. So when the broker executes the transaction, execute the selling, it has to be either equal to the limit price of 100 or higher than the limit price of 100. Okay. So remember, in a sell limit order, the investor can always give you the minimum price. Minimum, I need 100 to sell. In a buy, the investor will give the maximum 60 rupees, not more than that. Can be lesser, not more than 60. Okay. So remember where a minimum price and a maximum price will come. These are the two examples between a limit buy order and a limit sell order. Okay. Have a read on it, just as what I explained. So if a share price is at 21 and your order to your broker is to buy at 20. Okay. So if the price hits 20 or comes below 20, the broker will execute the order. If it is still at 21, the broker cannot execute the order. In a sell limit, let's say your order is to sell at 22 and current price is still at 21.5. If it falls below 22, the broker will not execute the order. Okay. But if it is if it's less than 22, the broker will not execute the order. But if it's higher or at 22, the broker will execute the order. Next, you have fill or kill order. Now, the name itself looks very funny, right? Fill or kill order. What it means is, the investor says, look here, I need 1,000 shares of the products. Either you buy the 1,000 at once or don't buy at all. Either you fill it immediately at once or don't execute the order, kill the order. Okay. Here the intention of the investor is to buy the entire ordered quantity immediately and at once. Both needs to be there. You need to buy the 1,000 immediately and at one transaction. If you are unable to do it, don't execute the order, cancel the order. Okay, that is the fill or kill order. Next, you have day orders. Day order is an order which is valid only for a day. Okay, what do you mean only for a day? In a day, how much? What is the trading hour of a Colombo Stock Exchange? Earlier, the stock exchange opened at 9:30, closed at 2:30. Now it opens at 11 o'clock, closes at 2:30. So within this time, from 11 to 2:30, if you can execute the order, execute the order. If you can't, after that, don't execute the order at all. only for that day the order is valid. Okay. If you can't execute from there on, order is cancelled. Good till cancelled order. Now this is the opposite of a day order. Here you will say put the order, keep it valid until I cancel. So until the investor calls the broker and say, look here, let's cancel that order will remain valid throughout. It's an open order. For example, you will say buy 1,000 rupees of 1,000 shares of DIP products. Okay, let's say at 50 rupees each. Currently the price is at 60, and you will see put a good till cancel order, GTC order, which means the broker will enter the order to the system and it will remain valid until the investor tells the broker to cancel, or until it gets filled, until the order is met. Okay. If it is not met, still it is valid and it will be there until investor cancels. What is important is the investor has to remember and cancel the order. The broker doesn't do anything. It is good till cancel, remember. So until the investor informs the broker, broker cannot cancel on their own. Okay, that is important. Now this good till cancel order, day order, fill or kill order are certain types which can be merged with the market order and a limit order. Now I told you, initially I put a limit order, right? Buy at 60 rupees or less. And I tell the broker, put it as a good till cancel order. Which means he will enter to the system a limit order which says buy 1,000 shares of DIP at 60 rupees or lesser. Okay. But this order is valid until the investor cancels. So good till order tells you the time in which that order is valid. Let's say the same limit order, but the investor says put that order only for today. If I can buy today, let's execute. So it's a day order. So within the day, if that limit order didn't go through, it will be cancelled from tomorrow. Okay. Or if it's a fill or kill order, either you buy that 6,000 shares at 60 rupees or less completely and at once, or cancel the order. Okay. Remember, fill or kill, day order, good till cancel order are dictating or telling you something about the validity period of that order. Good till cancel order, the order is valid until investor cancels. Day order is valid only for that particular day, only during that trading time. Fill or kill order, immediately at once. If you can do the order at once and immediately in one transaction, then go ahead. If not, cancel the order. Okay, I hope I'm clear. Now, good till cancelled order, in practical terms, what happens is it's very difficult for an investor to remember and inform the broker. So in Colombo Stock Exchange, when you enter good till cancelled order, usually it's valid only for 5 trading days. If you can just write it down, good till cancel orders, practically, they are only valid for 5 days in our system. After the 5th day, it will get cancelled. Okay. Just certain things that you need to know might test for your MCQs. Then you have stop loss order. What is a stop loss order is, just as what the name says, you are trying to stop your loss. Okay. If a share price is having a share decline, if the price is having a downfall, you are trying to stop your loss and immediately sell that share. Okay. If a share is having a continuous price increase and you are trying to buy that share, you will immediately put a stop loss at a price higher than the current trading price so that you can immediately buy it and curtail your loss. Okay. What is the objective of the investor in a stop loss order? To minimize their loss in the share. Okay, that is important. Now, for example, let's say in this scenario, continuous price decline. Okay, and currently it's getting traded at, let's say, 7,500, and you are already holding the stock and you want to materialize your gain. You will put a stop loss order. Let's say currently your price is you are at this price, closer to 7,800. You will inform your broker, look here, put a stop loss order at 7,750. Okay, which means if the share price declines to 7,750, you will immediately sell that share when the price goes anywhere beyond it. This is the minimum, this is the trigger point. If the share price goes below 7,750, immediately sell it. Okay, again, see the words, if the share price goes below this particular price, immediately sell it. So if it is at 7,750, will you execute? No. But if it goes to 7,749, immediately sell it. Okay, remember that. So a stop sell order is placed below the current price. You are at 7,800, but if there is a continuous decline, you want to get out. You want to minimize your loss. Okay, that is your view. What if it's in a buy order? In a buy situation, what happens? Let's say currently the price is at this position. Okay, price is at 7,000. You tell your broker, look here, if the price goes beyond 7,250, immediately purchase it. If I wait any longer, my loss will be higher. Why? I have to buy at a higher price. My purchase price is going to be higher. So currently you are at 7,000 and you're hoping the price will decline further. Okay, that is your view. But let's say price hits 7,250. Is that will it be executed at that price? No. But if the price hits 7,251, immediately the stop loss buy order will get executed. You will immediately buy because in your view it's going to increase higher than that. So let's immediately buy and cut our loss. Okay, that is why in a buy order, stop loss buy order, the price is placed above the current market price. Then we have take profit order, opposite to a stop loss order. Stop loss order, what was our view? We need to cut down our loss. Take profit order meaning you are now at a good position. You have already invested. You already have a profit in your investment. But you know that the price is now showing a declining trend. You're still at a profitable level, but there is a possibility of a decline. In a take profit order, you will inform your broker and say, look here, I'm comfortable with my profit. Let's get out of the stock when it hits this particular price. Okay, so you will try to sell off that stock immediately before the price begins to fall again. It is showing what it happens is it will have a continuous decline, continuous increase, right? But after it hits this particular price, there is a possibility that stock will have a downfall. So you will inform your broker, look here, I'm comfortable with this position. Let's materialize our profit. Why don't you sell it at this point and get out? Okay. So even at a price increase, without waiting to a further increase, you're comfortable. This is like, instead of being greedy for more profit, you want to take your profit. You earn 10%. That's enough. You want to get out from that position. That is what you call a take profit order. You are comfortable with the profit that you earn and you want to materialize that profit without waiting till it reaches a higher point and crash. Okay. So before it reaches even a higher point and takes a U-turn to a downfall, you want to materialize and get out. Okay. That is what a take profit order means. Then we have the stock market indices, which we are going to talk about. What are stock market indices? Why do we need a stock market indices or index? Because to measure the price movement of that stock exchange. Here, if you take the CSE, for me to know whether the Colombo Stock Exchange performed well than the day before, I will look at the index. Okay. Now here I know, compared to Tuesday, Wednesday, the market declined. This is the all share price index. So all the shares are measured here. So I know compared to Tuesday, market had a decline. Now here, what I can see, this is another price index. I know compared to last year, January, still we are at a comfortable position. Compared to last year, March, our market has been performing well. But if you compare to January, market has declined. Okay. So for understanding how the market is moving, a stock market index will help us. Okay. So there are certain users from the stock indices. We will discuss that. And we will go to the types of index. You have price weighted index, value weighted index, and a free float adjusted index. There are reasons why the index developed in these three stages. And finally, we will go to stock valuation. What are the methods of valuing a stock and how these two are different? So we have fundamental analysis and technical analysis. Now here in equity valuation, you won't be doing calculations. Okay. But you need to know the two methods. If you follow fundamental analysis, what are the information that you will use for such an analysis? If you go for a technical analysis, what are the informations that you will be using? Okay. And understanding that will allow us to compare between these two techniques. So on Saturday, we will look at index and go to the methods of valuation, and then we move into Colombo Stock Exchange. In our stock exchange, how are certain matters done? What are the certain features or certain products available in our stock exchange? Okay, is what we will discuss on Saturday. So thank you so much for listening in today, even on a free day. We will again meet on Saturday at our usual time. Okay, thank you so much.